Amber, Mr. Keith Tuck, owner of Tuck Farms. Keith Tuck is a third-generation farmer who went from a conventional tobacco cow-calf operation to grazing cattle 300 days a year. Stockpiling and strip grazing, fescue, allows his cattle to graze through most of the winter. Converting several fields to native warm season grasses provides more consistent forage during the dry, hot summers. Keith sold all his haying equipment and purchased what hay he needs. He currently serves as the president of the Virginia Forage and Grasslands Council, president of the Bedford Beef Producers Association, chairman of the Peaks of Otter, is that right? Peaks of Otter Soil and Water District, as well as a board member of the Smith Mountain FFA alumni. Keith's passion is grazing forages and helping others to achieve that goal by speaking at, I tried to figure that out, VHGC. What does that stand for?
Virginia Forage and Grassland.
I don't know what I kind of figured. Virginia Forage and Grassland Winter Conferences, local cattlemen's meeting, and hosting field day pasture walks at his farm. So let's welcome Keith here.
Thank you for coming. My grandfather purchased this farm in 1962. He was already a farmer, but I don't know if y'all know Central Virginia Smith Mountain Lake. It's a big man-made lake. It's a sister lake to it. Took his farm, the one that was below Smith Mountain, to keep that one regulated. So he had to relocate. So he bought this one. And of course, back then, you know, tobacco was the cash crop. That's what we raised. We had about 15 to 20 acres of that, and made a good living, or he made a good living on that. And my dad worked a public job plus farm too, but made a lot of hay and grazed cows and fed a lot of hay. And when we took a tobacco buy out in the early 2000s, you know, we just went to strictly cow-calf and all that. And me and my dad kind of took it over. And I mean, I was working other jobs. We was barely getting by, you know. He was basically just paying the bills and wasn't really making anything. I wanted to do more. And it took me several years of convincing, and I finally talked my dad into doing it with some part of the programs from the Soil and Water and NRCS and all. We installed some infrastructure, but I'll get into that in a second. But we have about 250 acres of grass that we rotationally graze, around 80 cow-calf pairs and around 18 or 20, you know, all these numbers fluctuate year to year, around 20 heifers, 3 or 4 bulls. Works out to about a little over 2¼ acres per cow. Now, I used to cut 60 acres of hay once in the spring. I don't do it anymore. And in 2013, I got strictly to fall calving. I seem to like that the best. In 2015, I started purchasing all of my hay. So it took me a year or two before I could do it, because it's a big leap to take, and I finally sold all my hay equipment. And then in 19 and 20, I've planted the warm season grasses. So this is just a picture of the farm, and all that you see in red, and this is before the 60 acres. This is when we conventionally grazed and made a lot of hay. We used to cut all that for hay. Most of that is pasture fields, but in the spring we'd take a cut in the hay and then we'd graze it. So we'd work like a month solid, you know, just doing hay. And in 2010, we put in our infrastructure, like I said, with the cost share programs, and the red fences you see is the cross fences and some boundary stream exclusion and stuff like that around all the waterways and the creeks and everything. So we got that in, took 2 wells, because one property is across the highway, and 8 waters and 2 stream crossings and the fencing. And I can't remember offhand how many feet and all that. But then in 2019, as years went on and I started doing rotational grazing more, I got to seeing more places I could need. After you, like she said, you fine-tune things, or somebody had mentioned it, you start seeing places where you know, I could use another fence here or a water over here at this place or something like that. So through the Working Lands for Wildlife programs to help me establish my warm season grasses, they would also help pay a little bit of assistance on some more fencing and water hookups. So I got 2 more permanent waterers, 2 portable waterers, and then 18 quick connects, and that's the little dots you can kind of see on the fence lines there, and a few more cross fences. So now I have 22 permanent paddocks that I can subdivide as many times as I want with polywire. I could make one into 50 if I wanted to, whatever how I want to do it. So I'm always moving cattle basically every day. But I had to take a step further back. You know, I'm not a cattle producer. I had to really look at it. I'm really a grass producer. And I'm just harvesting it and marking it through my cattle. So you have to really manage that grass is what I had to start doing. Instead of managing cattle, I need to manage my grass. So, and I work with, you know, all my local extension agent, like I said, Soil and Water, NRCS, anybody I can, people at this conference, and, you know, you network. That's how you find out things and run questions by them. So for many years during the summer, I could only do weekly moves because of the way the paddocks were set up in shade. I didn't have a whole lot of trees and stuff for shade, so I couldn't really fine tune them. So I focused on my winter stockpiling. And this is just a picture of it there. You can see that's probably about 2 feet of grass. Well, there it is. I forgot I had that. It's about 2 feet of grass there that's stockpiled for the winter time that I move them daily on. Started off moving them, you know, back in 2010 for 4 or 5 years. I'd give them enough for 4 or 5 days. And every year I'm starting to get more and more intense. And now I'm doing it every day. Well, I'm not here. I'm here today, so my son is actually doing it today. And this is just an example. You can see I started at a water point. There's a water source off to the right, and you can kind of see where the fence was at, kind of a disturbed ground a little bit, and then you can see where I've moved it up, and I'm getting ready to move. I just keep walking it across the field, just moving that fence, giving them enough for about a day. And they do really well on that. And they will go through snow 6, 8 inches deep to get to that grass. The first year, you know, we had about 6, 8 inches of snow, and I went over there, and I have a picture at home on it, but not on here. I unrolled 3 or 4 rolls of hay. I said, they got to have some hay. I went back that afternoon, and guess where they were all at? They were either doing this, what you see, or they were laying on the hay. That's it. They was not eating it. That winter, that was the winter of 2015, I fed 13 rolls that whole winter. I used to feed 300 to 400 rolls when we fed for like 5 months, you know, the old way. But I was worried about the nutrition of the grass. So my extension agent, you know, he said, well, you're most demanding as a first calf heifer raising that calf. You know, she needs 11% protein and about 60% energy. So me and him took samples of the hay that I had in the barn and the stockpile in 2013 there in January, and you can see that the stockpile grass outperformed the hay that was in the barn. And then about 2 years later, we tried it again. I had some orchard grass hay that we had got, and the orchard grass is just a little bit better in the protein, but the energy, the fescue still held up there. I mean, it's still, so it's fine. I don't give them anything but hay, if they need the hay, and grain, or not grain, grass. They get no supplements other than just minerals. And as you can see, this is as the winter goes on, the color of that grass will start to go out of it, but it's still some green down in there, and it's still nutritious. And you can see that cow has got a very good body condition, growing that calf, and they're just getting along fine. I mean, they come out in the spring, they're not thin or anything, they're good. And them calves, I like to fall calving because I get so much grazing through the winter. By the time spring hits, when we have that spring flush of grass, them calves are like 300 to 400 pounds, and man, they just pack it on, and then I'm selling them that summer. So they're just putting on that final weight. And then you get a lot of free fertilizer by strip grazing and rotating them a lot. You can't walk 2 feet without stepping in it, you know, it's everywhere. Conventional grazing, they say it takes 27 years to get a pile of manure on every square foot of land. And in rotational, I think they said you can do it in 3 or something like that. Well, I mean, mine's covered. And this is just an example. You can see off to the right where the fence was at, and I just took it down, and them tracks right up the center is where the fence is, and there's the cows, and then you can see the calves. Them calves figure out they can slip under that wire and they can get the best ahead of mama. And that's the main goal. That's my product I'm selling, so I'll let them go ahead. It's kind of creep grazing unintentionally, but they do it. And the next time you go out there, the calves only go one lot ahead of them, it seems like. Then the next day when you go out, and as soon as you move them calves will go into the next one. They just automatically do it. They just learn it. It's neat to see how they do that. The cattle make them so much easier to handle by moving them daily or every couple days or whatever. As a kid, I remember, my grandfather or my dad say, all right, we're going to work cattle today. Well, it was a half-a-day rodeo, trying to get them up into the barn lot and then all this mess. And now I drive a RTV Kubota. I don't push them. I just drive out there. I don't even have to say nothing. They hear that thing crank up and they start coming. And I drive into the barn lot. In 5 minutes, I shut the gate, start working cattle. Easy. My kids move them from field to field. There's nothing to it. They just go. So it makes it a whole lot easier. Everything's a lot less stressful. And this is just some numbers I put together. You can see back when we were doing it conventional way, how much hay we fed, 350 to 400 rolls. We used to cut about 120 acres for hay and spent about $20,000 a year in fertilizer, trying to, for the pastures and the hay fields and stuff. And of course, I just kind of estimated a cow cost, close to $400 there. And then over time, when I started it in 2011, and then I skipped a few years there, but you can see the numbers coming down. Now in 2020, you can see I purchased a lot of hay because 2019 was extremely dry. I fed up all my reserved hay that I had in the barn, so I had to replenish myself again. So now I have like 2 years worth of hay in the barn. I'm always trying to keep 2 years ahead. That way I'm kind of like an insurance policy. But now my cow costs are down to about $150 a cow. And this is some of the benefits of the strip grazing the following spring. This is no fertilizer or anything. This is just what it is. The grass still gets ahead of the cows, but they'll get to it at some point. I never try to graze it below 4 inches. Sometimes not even that close, depending on how fast the grass is growing. But, I'm trying to get that healthy, deep root to hold that moisture, because in the summer where I'm located near the lake changes the weather. It won't cross the lake, it just turns. So we get pretty dry. So I'm trying to keep that moisture and keep that ground covered. I have a lot of neighbors now, and we used to do it. Make a first cut in the hay, finish up sometime in June. About July, they're feeding hay again because it's just done got so dry. And the very first year we tried this in 2011, the pasture in front of our house, we used to cut it and then graze it. And we didn't cut it that spring. And I put the cows in. My dad said, I'm going to let you have control of the cows. I said, okay. I put them in there. It was about 18 inches of grass. They stayed in there like a week or whatever. I took them out, and it was still like 10 or 12 inches of grass in there. And he started chewing me out. What are you doing? You take it, just look at all that grass. I said, just calm down, just see what works. And in the back of my mind, under my breath, I was going, please, God, let this work. I was praying because I know I wouldn't hear the end of it if I didn't. But when we got back around about a month later and it done got dry and all our neighbors were feeding hay, that grass was back up to 18 inches tall. It had jumped right back. And then he looked at me and he said, I think you know what you're doing. I'm going to let you have control of the cows now. So I took that to convince him. But to deal with some of the tree issues that I have, because my grandfather cleared the land, cleared a lot of it, and just left a little patch here and there of trees for shade, which is fine when you have an 80-acre pasture, but then you start subdividing it, and then you're running out of shade. It's all in one spot. So I ended up buying some of these mobile shade units. They're called shade havens, and they very easy to move around, and the cattle, you go out there and move them, the cows just walk right under it, right with you. So especially when it's hot. But they work really good.
It's called an umbrella.
Big umbrella, yeah. But it's quick and easy to move. They're easy to set up. And I'm working with NRCS now to actually plant some more trees, some shelter belts, but we hadn't got into that process yet. But the final results of what you get with just hay and grass, that steer on the left there, that was in 2015 when we had them real high cattle prices. Y'all, I wish that steer right there off his mama at 9 months with nothing but grass and hay, weighed 775 pounds. He brought me $1,900. I said, I wish I had a whole load of them every year like that, but you know, he was like the top calf that year. But anyway, so I tried some summer annuals for a few years during the summer times, and they worked good. Some of them worked, some of them didn't. But I just got tired of planting them every year and putting that, spraying and killing and all that. So I talked to our state forage specialist, and he got me convinced on planting these warm season grasses. So I put in switchgrass in 2019. I've grazed it 2 seasons so far. And I'm trying to remember, I think I got 26 days of grazing this past year out of it. And last year, it was close to the same. So it's about a month of grazing for the cows, which saved me a month of feeding hay and gave my pastures a month's rest without trying to overgraze them or anything. And I also planted some blue stem mix, and this was my first summer grazing it, and it done really well. But that's just a picture of it's a big blue, little blue, and Indian grass, and it's doing really well. And then some of the benefits for rotational grazing: feed a lot less hay. I do less pasture dragging. I used to drag, most of my pastures trying to drag the manure or wherever I fed hay, just kind of dragging it out. I do a little now, but not near as much as I used to. I use less. Actually, I'm using no fertilizer right now. For the last 2 years, I hadn't bought any fertilizer. And 2019, like I said, we were real dry that fall. I used to put down nitrogen in late summer for fall stockpile, and it wasn't calling for any rain, so I was like, I'm not going to put any down. I'm not going to waste my money. We finally got some rain late, and I still grazed up until February with no fertilizer. So I was like, I don't think I really need it. So the next year I put it on 2 little bitty fields just to try, test plot. And across the fence, no difference in the grass, no difference in grazing days or anything. And I said, So this year I tested for organic matter. I don't have a base from years past, but I asked my extension agent, what's the organic matter? What should it be in our area, the average? He said, maybe 2-3% if you're lucky. My lowest field was 4, my highest was 6, and everything was in between. I said, yeah, I ain't buying no more fertilizer. Of course, less labor for feeding hay because I'm feeding less hay. The tractor, actually, I'm going out in the wintertime and cranking a tractor about once a month just to keep the battery from going dead. Cattle make them so much easier to handle. Like I showed you, the calves can graze ahead, that's what you want to get the best for them to gain the weight. I'm getting healthier soils, building the organic matter. It's a lot less stressful, especially not making the hay and even working the cattle. You can ask my wife. She's sitting right back there. She said I'm a lot more pleasant now. And you get more time for family or travel or whatever you enjoy doing because, you're not out. Like I can go out and move a fence, set up, move a fence in 15, 20 minutes. I'm done for the day.
What do you do the rest of the day?
Well, according to my wife, I don't do nothing but walk out and open the gate. That's what she says. You can clean the house. She makes me clean the house, cook, do laundry. I'm a house husband now. Yeah, it's got its downsides too. You got to find something to do outside the house or she's going to put you to work. So some of the key to success, at least I think, for management, management is the main thing, but you got to learn to manage your time. I spend a lot more time now at a desk or a computer planning things out. I'm looking ahead couple months down the road, like which field, trying to plan things way ahead to know where the cattle need to get to and stuff like that. You got to figure all that out. You got to manage your forage, you know. Like I said, don't overgraze it. Give it plenty of rest. Manage your cattle, just like you normally would. I mean, you know, moving them and stuff. You got to manage your cost. And one way, you know, I know you can't control what things cost, like the price of fertilizer or fuel or whatever, but you can decide if you're going to purchase it or not. Like me, I'm not going to purchase any fertilizer. They're going to be out the roof this spring. So. Manage your records. Try to keep good records. I keep records of, you know, I'm sure a lot of y'all do, rainfall. You know, every field, when I move a cattle in, when I take them out, I'm measuring grass heights. You know, or try to record as much as I can, because if I don't write something down, I forget the time I walk out the room. And then manage how you market your cattle, you know. We started in our area of Bedford beef producers, and we started a truckload, you know, wean vaccinated sale about 4 years ago. And so I think we're getting a premium. I've been keeping the track of it, me and the extension agent, and I think we've had 14 sales. We've over what they would have brought at weaning, the premium. I think the number of all the cattle we've sold so far, I think it was just over $500,000 extra in the last 4 years. So I'm getting between $100 and $150 per calf every time, extra, I think. So you got to manage all that. And that's about it. Any questions? Yes, ma'am.
I want to ask about, talking about less dragging.
Uh-huh.
My husband will move the cows every day.
Uh-huh.
And then, and of course, he has paddocks set up ahead. And then when the manure kind of dries out a little bit, he drags it.
Mm-hmm.
Because we find that if we don't drag it, then they'll poop everywhere, but they won't eat up close to that poop, and you'll have all that wasted stuff.
Right.
What's your thoughts on that?
I agree with that, but I just don't go out and do mine.
So your cows don't care, or they still stay away from the poop, right?
By the time they come back, it's most of it's kind of dissolved on in pretty good, you know, broken down enough.
Goes back to that $4 diesel fuel.
Yeah.
Dragging it.
Yeah. I mean, diesel fuel
is
or
about
whatever you're dragging it with, it's going to cost you your time too. So.
He clips the weeds as he goes.
Mm.
He has a little, so he's got a zero turn, and he drags it with that, with his maul. So,
Other questions? Go.
Yes, sir.
How did you establish your switchgrass and listen?
I gave a talk yesterday on that and another, but anyway, we do a spray down in the fall to kill everything there. And then you can either plant and smother it, but I just let it fallow over the winter. And then you do another spray that spring or like in March. And then I no-till drilled it. Use a no-till drill for both of them.
It usually takes a little while to get the seeds established. And so till it's established enough that it can withstand grazing.
Correct. One whole year.
You end up with some other plants, you know.
The first year you can't graze it. That summer, the first year, is a lot of foxtail and crabgrass was in it. I had a good stand of what I planted, but you couldn't see it. So I went in and I clipped it as high as I could, like 15 inches with a bush hog. And then like a month later, actually that picture of that blue stem that I showed you, that was a month after clipping. A month before, all you could see was foxtail. And then it got the sunlight down to it once I clipped it, and it just jumped. So that's a way to manage it. Yes, sir.
So, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong here, you said your cow cost was you said your cow cost was $150, and that's annually?
Yes.
That's impressive. So, is that including fixed and variable costs? All of that together, or?
Yep. I had to look at my wife because she's the one that figured it out for me, and I was like, that's why I looked at her. Yeah.
Maintenance, overhead, taxes, land payments, all that. That's just what you can't in it. I think that's what he's getting at.
Property taxes, I mean, insurance, everything.
That's pretty impressive, because nationally, and averages can be a little bit.
I think national's what, $700 or $800, something
Yeah.
like that, somewhere in that range.
Yeah, and like averages can be a little bit deceiving. You know, I heard averages described as putting your head in the freezer and lighting your butt on fire and saying on average you're comfortable, you know, but anyways. But that, it's just, I haven't seen a cow cost that low. That's impressive, so thank you.
Yeah, I don't like spending money. I mean, about the only thing I spend it on is about minerals. Keep minerals out in front of them. That's probably my biggest cost now, a couple $1,000s a year. And then, of course, the medication for vaccinating the calves and all that. And I clip pastures, but I try not to do that as much as I can. So
Well, all that spare time, your bar bill will be the most expensive deal.
she don't let me drive nowhere. Closest bar to us would be like
Drive that
20
tractor
miles.
and the bush hog over there. Well, one more question.
Is that a hot fescue? Is it Kentucky 31?
Yes, it's Kentucky 31. Yep.
Ain't gonna happen in our country, in Utah, but it's a nice story. Well, thank you.
Well, appreciate
Thank you
it.
for being here, Keith. Yeah.